We also acknowledge the Indigenous peoples who traveled these lands before the written treaties. Today, Chatham-Kent neighbors of the Lenape at Elnapawi, Lakawit, also called Delaware Nation at Moravian Town, and the unceded territory of Bakajwanong, Wapua Island First Nation. We also acknowledge the Indigenous. People who traveled these lands before the written treaties. Today, Chatham-Kent neighbors of the Lenape, Elnapawi, Lakawit, also called Delaware Nation at Moravian Town, and the unceded territory of Bakajwanong, Wapua Island First Nation, Chatham-Kent continues to be home to diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Chatham-Kent is covered by the Treaty 2, the Detroit Treaty of 1790, Treaty 7, Somber Township Treaty of 1796, and Treaty 25, Longwoods Treaty of 1822. We also recognize that this region is subject to the earlier wampum agreements, like the two-row wampum and the dish with one spoon wampum. As beneficiaries of this treaty, we recognize our responsibilities, including our collective responsibilities to the land and water. Thank you. Mr. Chair, we have no disclosures of pecuniary interest. And this evening we have regrets from Councillor Anderson, and we have two councillors participating, and then also a regret from Councillor Allen. And we have two councillors participating online, and that is Councillor Bondi and Councillor Crew. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have an agenda before us tonight. This is a information evening, so just remind committee members, you're free to ask questions at the end of the presentation or state some requests for additional information, but we won't be taking any motions related to the budget tonight. With that said, I do want to thank Steve, Gord, and the budget team, as well as the rest of administrative staff for their months of hard work in bringing forward this year's budget update in what I would say is the most user-friendly, digestible form, transparent form that we've seen to date. appreciate there'll be a lot of discussion this year, and there's still significant opportunity for community input over the next number of weeks. Again, would remind members that over this next 3 weeks, if you do have items of interest you'd like more information on, if you want to know the impact of different decisions, to please let staff know those questions in advance, so when we get to the budget meetings, we can have that information on hand when we're making those decisions. With that, we will start the budget presentation, so I will turn it over to Steve or Gord.
Sorry, I think we can go right to the mayor to start into the
Right to the mayor,
presentation.
yep, sorry.
Can we go back to you, Brock? Welcome, everybody. So, just want to start with the budget, what we're trying to do collectively. I mean, you're planning for the next 12 months, but you're also laying the groundwork for the next 20, 30, 40 years in the things we're doing today. And that's, as we set the budget looking forward, that's what we're really working towards to ensure that that happens. Building the future, when we get into it, I'll get in a little more detail, but that's the collective, a reason why, and I like the summary there. Smart decisions today create a thriving community tomorrow. I really would love to see in 20 years is when council looks back at the things that we've decided over the budget the last few years, that it was very strategically thought out and the community is much better for it. So go to the next slide, please. There we go. As we know, we're a very large municipality, one of the largest in Ontario, the 9th largest in Canada. And with that, we have a whole lot of infrastructure. And I know council's very familiar with all the infrastructure that we have. Roads, 1,533 kilometers of paved roads, 1,624 kilometers of gravel roads, 194 kilometers of surface treated roads. And bridges, we have of all the bridges in Ontario, we have 4.88% of the bridges in Ontario. We have 0.7% of the population. So you look at the huge infrastructure. We have 20% of all Ontario drains in Chatham-Kent. So that 1 in 5 drains that's in Ontario sits right here. So those are some significant assets that we have to maintain. So with that, next slide. So as we talked about population growth. So over the last several years, we've grown 6.4% in population. We're creating an environment here that people want to move to. We're seeing, when you look at the stats, which are not included in here, a significant growth aspect is 25 to 49 is the growth age. A lot of people are coming to the community recognizing the benefits of that. So with that, a lot of people see optimism, and this is where the budget kind of sets the tone. Next slide. One of the when we're preparing our yearly budget update, maintaining affordability for our residents is at the forefront of everyone at the table's minds. At our current tax level, the average Chatham-Kent resident pays the lowest property taxes compared to other municipalities with a population over 100,000. We've seen this in the BMA study the last several years. We go to the next slide, that this represents every municipality in Ontario that is over 100,000. And so what BMA study does, just to clarify, is they take a bungalow, a 3-bedroom bungalow, and they put it in every municipality in this survey, every one. And they say, what would the property taxes be on that specific property? As you can see, Chatham-Kent is the lowest, it would be $37.50, but then you go to the far right, you're looking at that same might be 7,000. So it's almost half price here. I know that we talk a lot about the cost of property taxes, but when compared to municipalities over 100,000, that's where we sit, and we've been sitting there for several years now. Next slide. This is going to be a big theme of our budget, is OSIF funding. So OSIF, which is Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, is received by about 420 or so municipalities in Ontario. The largest ones don't receive it. It's meant to cover off rural infrastructure. So it's based on a formula. And with that formula, the province provides it. It says, based on the assets that you have in the community, this is what you should be getting. And that's why I really emphasize all the assets when we talked about the bridges and the culverts and all those things that we have. This is what's really driving an anomaly with the OSIF funding. Next slide, please. So Chatham-Kent is one of 3 municipalities that have a funding cap. So meaning that there's only us, Sudbury, and Thunder Bay are the only communities that our funding formula is capped at $10 million. So that creates a huge problem for us. We should be receiving $29.3 million from the province annually. This is not a one-time fund. This is every year we should be receiving that. So you look, that's an absolute huge gap. That's about a 9 to 10% tax increase. We would said we're going to fill that gap tomorrow. That's what we need to do to fill that gap. Keep in mind that we're only one of 3 municipalities that cap's impacting. So in 2026, that leaves us with a $19.3 million funding imbalance. So with the OSIF funding cap in place, more infrastructure costs are municipally funded in 2026. So we are picking up that gap. We can't not keep funding the huge gap that we have. So with this, when I go into the next page, we'll look at the proposed numbers for the budget for 2026. So I want to focus on the municipal portion. 2.92, back when a few months ago, I asked the administration to come in with a budget of 3% subject to federal, provincial support on our capital. To date, we haven't received that. So the municipal portion is 2.92. So I want to point that maintaining our services, so if we didn't have to do those other things, increase capital spending, social investments, and change in services, the tax increase would be 1.12%. So we're putting more capital in, so that represents dollars that we're spending more than we did last year on capital from a tax base. Social investments, those things are, a lot of that is from the second part of the cabin project. Other things that we're doing for social investments. Change in services, those are a few things, and we'll get into more detail later on, but so it breaks down to 2.92. But the OSIF funding cap is 2%. So we put that in there, and we've been working a lot with the province, and we're very hopeful that they'll step up and help. But we need to bring this to the forefront. We need to ensure that everyone is aware of it. In fact, we ran a full-page ad in today's Voice to highlight that so people can look at it and understand that we need that support, that we are paying more property taxes because of this formula that has that cap in it. So that's what, in a summary, that's what we're looking at. So with that, I'll pass it over to Brock to continue the presentation.
Thank you. So just as a reminder, this is the 3rd year of a 4-year budget process. So in understanding how we got to this 4.92% proposed increase, it's helpful to think about where we started. So you remember from last year's 2025 annual update, there was a forecasted increase of 8.77%. So that was at the end of our last budget process. Based on some council decisions and cost increases, that number was actually moved up by 0.29%. Based on those increases. And over the past number of months after direction was given by the mayor for the 3% budget goal outside of provincial and federal funding levels, staff went away, worked through a number of processes and found 4.14% in efficiencies, which is around $9.5 million. And that brought that projected increase down to the 4.92% that we see tonight. Next slide, please. So in that small portion, that 0.29% that represents cost increases, just as a reminder, there's a few items in there that we talked about throughout the year. So there's an increase in the gravel road conversion program that's part of that increase. There's an increase in security, particularly with the library that we discussed that's part of that increase. A few smaller items like the CCTV expansion program as well that are all caught in that 0.29%. Next slide, please. And then the efficiencies. So that $9 million in efficiencies found over the past number of months. There's quite a few items on the list, but some things of note. We discussed the CAO office restructuring, creation of the deputy CAO position, and restructuring in that office was a net savings of $160,000, for example. There's an insurance premium decrease of $450,000. fuel budget adjustments, removal of debt payment for the Bloomfield Business Park. So a number of items that add up to that $9 million, which is equivalent to a 4.14% decrease from that initial projection. So with that, I'll turn it to Gord for our favorite topic, the OSIF 2026 funding.
Thank you, everyone. Gord Quinton, Chief Financial Officer, and I just wanted to get a little bit more into the details of the OSIF. The mayor's already introduced it and spoke about that infrastructure cap, but want to really get into what it means to Chatham-Kent. For the first year, and OCF's been around for several years, but for the first year, for 2026 fiscal year, it's actually based on real numbers. Not that it wasn't based on our financial statements and what we had for capital assets, but this is the first year that it's actually not just Chatham-Kent, but across Ontario, we have detailed asset management plans. And you remember Sean Hilderly is in the audience today, and the asset management plan staff worked hard with the directors across the organization on getting hard data for our asset management plan, and specifically what the current replacement values are. So we're no longer guessing. We've measured those 800 bridges and 16,000 culverts and the 20% share of the drains and our water and sewer systems. And we know exactly what our replacement value is and what our infrastructure gap is. And that's where we should be getting the $29.3 million. So this is built on real math. So compare around us. For example, Essex County, $15.4 million. That does not include Windsor. Windsor and London and Middlesex County are not eligible. So not including Windsor, Essex County as a group of municipalities is getting $15.4 million. They have about 116 people per population per square kilometer, population density. In Chatham-Kent, we're around 44 people per square kilometer. So even though they have close to triple the amount of population density, to help pay for their roads and bridges and things that they have in Essex County, the province is giving them $15.4 million. It basically means that we have about double the value of assets in Chatham-Kent, close to double, and therefore we should be getting $29.3 million and are only getting the 10. Lambton to the north, I won't go through them all, but Lambton to the north, another example, that does include Sarnia, because Sarnia is a similar population to Chatham, so they are eligible for OCIF, and in total it's $18.5 million. One other point in the math that's occurred, these updated numbers actually increase what we should be getting from what we got in 2025. This year we got, for the past 2 years, we've gotten approximately 25 million. Sorry, the formula said we should have got 25 million. We were been capped at 10 million all along. Now with the updated data from our asset management plan, we should be getting 29 million. So, and in case of Lambton County, they got $16.5 million last year. They got a $2 million boost up to $18.5 million with their updated asset management plans. Similar in Middlesex and Elgin, so I won't continue to go on through them, but it's just we seriously hope that the province is listening. We are in contact, having dialogue with staff at the province. It is happening. I think they're coming around to listening, but here we are on a budget night, and there's no help in sight now. We can hope for the next provincial budget, but we really need a commitment from those MPPs. Next slide. So in Kent, just going through a couple other grant programs, because OCF is one of the most important because it's annual predictable funding for infrastructure. But then there's one-off funding. So how's Chatham-Kent doing with that? So encampment funding. We received $282,800, and we put it to great use and used every dollar of it. But look around us, Lambton County, including Sarnia, at $2.9 million. Elgin County, including St. Thomas, at $4.1 million. Norfolk County, $5.4 million. Even the city of Windsor at $742 million. So what's up? Encampments seem to be an issue across Ontario, not just in specific areas. So again, no rationale. I know Jody's team tried to find out the why. We really got poor answers. Next slide. Municipal housing infrastructure program. This is the good news in the last provincial funding was a lot of funding for housing enabling water systems fund, specifically what it's called. So now we're getting into the big numbers. Look around us. Essex County, and this is over 88 million. Lambton County, over 44 million. City of London, 24 million. Middlesex County, over 26 million. And Norfolk at over 16.5 million. Chatham-Kent, 0. Makes no sense. I want to go back 2 council meetings ago. Council approved a great new development, York development in North Chatham at the power center up there, putting in apartment buildings. And if you remember, at that time, we were talking that only stage 1 could proceed. Well, why? Because we need a sewage pump station on the north side of Chatham. It's not only to unlock up to the power center there, but it's also for single-family subdivision between the O'Neill Nature Preserve and Gregory Drive. There's that land that's been ready to go. It needs a sewage pumping station. It's $35 million. We were in fact specifically asked by provincial staff and our MPPs to make sure that we're applying to this specific fund. So, and we did. We put in an excellent application. It was going to unlock over 1,500 units of housing. We got 0. And the next slide, please. Now, on this slide, this is a very, very unique fund. It's not that across Ontario that this was given out. It actually was only given to 2 municipalities, Leamington and the Niagara region. But it was specifically for agricultural irrigation support to the greenhouse industries. Perhaps it wasn't our time yet. These were needs, well-developed needs that needed to be done, but I sure hope that Chatham-Kent can get to the top of the list the next round or in the next year or two to provincial budgets for if we want to support raw water options for our greenhouse sector instead of a draw off of municipal potable water. $41 million would go a long ways of making that happen. So in summary, we clearly have mathematically, we've now illustrated in great detail, thousands of items that are documented detail of the immense need to the province, that we need help with our aging infrastructure. As staff, we do constantly apply to these things. It's not that we're not applying to grants. We keep on applying and doing our best at applications, but to the province, please help us. And I know you've heard that from me before. It was great to have a federal budget just yesterday come out with a generational infrastructure investment plan. It's too soon to know anything Chatham-Kent-wise, but there was an emphasis on housing. We need a lot of affordable housing and supportive housing in Chatham-Kent. That's part of the federal document. I hope we see windows of applications that we can apply to, and we'll do our best to apply for every penny that we can get. Steve, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Gord. Steve Brown, Director of Budget and Performance Services. So let's start with the purpose of this update. The annual budget update captures any changes made through budget amendments. These updates give us flexibility to respond to circumstances that require additional funding or resource adjustments. Now, while the Municipal Act allows municipalities to adopt multi-year budgets, it also requires those budgets to be readopted annually. Why? To make sure any necessary changes are incorporated and budget remains responsive to the changing needs. So now let's take a look at what that means for 2026. The 2026 budget includes a 0.35% annual tax increase for the tax rate stabilization, which was approved as part of the original multi-year budget. This increase is helping us offset unexpected pressures from the multi-year budget approval in 2023 that carry over into 2026. Looking ahead, we also have planned allocation of 0.5% in 2027. These future allocations act as a buffer for unexpected events and tax fluctuations, whether from one-time costs or ongoing expenditures like contract increases beyond projections, new council initiatives, or changes in economic conditions. Essentially, this is the same approach that we've taken as part of this annual update. Finally, let's talk about how amendments are classified. Under Chatham-Kent's multi-year budget policy, there are 3 classifications of amendments that can occur. For the first type is driven by council priorities. Council sets the direction for the municipality. If there is a new priority or change in direction after the multi-year budget has been approved, that change requires adjustments to the business plans or the budget. It comes back to council as a budget amendment. So essentially, any new initiative or shift in priorities triggers this amendment. The second type relates to cost pressures. Over the past several years, we've seen significant changes in contracts, inflation, and economic conditions. These are examples of unanticipated economic changes that require council's consideration for a budget amendment. In short, when costs rise beyond what was planned, we need to revisit the budget. The third type is tied to legislation and funding. This happens when there's new regulations or change in existing regulations. So for example, changes in the federal or provincial funding for areas like public health, employment and social services, housing, or even our Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. These changes can have a big impact on our budget and require amendments to keep us aligned. So those are the 3 classifications: new council direction, cost drivers, and regulatory changes. Each one ensures we can adopt and maintain a balanced budget as circumstances evolve. So let's start with why this approach matters. By linking council's strategic priorities to departmental business plans and then adopting a 4-year budget, we create an integrated, long-term approach. This alignment ensures council's priorities are directly connected to the funding plans needed for the implementation. So in other words, strategy and resources move together. Now, this is important to emphasize. Implementing a multi-year budget is not a one-time exercise. It must be reviewed and adopted annually through the budget updates. And that brings us to tonight, our second annual update under this new approach. So what does this mean for the community? Switching to a multi-year budget gives residents of Chatham-Kent greater certainty about future taxes and the timelines for implementing council's strategic plan. It's about predictability and transparency, 2 things that residents value. Talking about community input, Chatham-Kent's annual budget survey is an important tool for both staff and council. It helps us understand the community's priorities for spending and which services residents consider most important. In short, it's about listening before we make decisions. Here's how we gathered that input. As in past years, a survey was launched through Let's Talk Chatham-Kent. This year, it ran from September 29th to October 15th. The full results are available on the municipal budget webpage for anyone who wants to dive deeper. Transparency is key. We want residents to see what we heard. Now, who took part? We had a diverse mix of homeowners and business owners from across all 6 wards in Chatham-Kent. Their feedback gave us valuable insights into how people feel about budget topics and priorities. This helps ensure our decisions reflect the community's voice. So what does this mean for the average homeowner? The proposed 2026 budget changes result in an impact of $104 in taxes for every $100,000 of property assessment. Breaking down the municipal portion, maintain existing services was 1.12, infrastructure at 0.7 if the province had eliminated the OSIF cap, social issues 0.62, and a change in service levels of 0.48. That's a total municipal increase of 2.92%, or 4.92% without the OSIF cap being lifted. This breakdown shows where the increases are coming from and why they matter. So at this point, I just want to address, in the budget book, there's a different number than we have up here. The reason being our OMPF funding, well, we were expecting more. We didn't get quite as much as we originally planned. Still great news. We did receive a fairly substantial increase in the OMPF funding, but just not as much as expected. We found out last Friday, so we made the adjustments in the presentation, but the budget book was already printed at that point. So let's take a look at staffing trends over the past decade. From 2018 through the end of this multi-year budget in 2027, tax-funded FTEs for municipal operations, excluding police and the pathways on park, have increased by just 10.34 positions. That's just over one tax-funded position per year. So even though population and service demands are rising, our workforce growth has been modest. This shows we've been managing growth very carefully, but this is not sustainable in the long term. Now, there's one area that does stand out. Riverview Gardens. Staffing there has increased by nearly 100 FTEs over the same 10-year period. Why? Primarily because of the 4 Hours of Care initiative, which is largely funded by the province. But this increase doesn't happen in isolation. It creates ripple effects for other municipal departments like Human Resources, Payroll, ITT, who need to manage those new staff. In some cases, those departments have had to add staff themselves to handle the extra workload. So while the funding is provincial, the operational impact is local. Let's take a step back and look at the big picture. When we compare Chatham-Kent's operating and capital tax increases since 2016 to the Consumer Price Index, our cumulative increases for both operating and capital budgets fall below CPI. That's important because even with rising inflation, we've kept costs under control. Chatham-Kent's efficiency has allowed us to manage operational costs wisely and keep capital investments moving forward. Over the last 10 years, the operating budget increased 18%, and the capital budget increased by 23%. Compare that to the Consumer Price Index, which rose 30% over that same period. So, despite inflationary pressures, we've kept tax increases below CPI, a strong indicator of fiscal responsibility. Looking at where the 2026 capital budget update is investing, this update reflects our 4-year capital plan over the 2024 to 2027 multi-year budget. Chatham-Kent is projected to invest over $573 million in various infrastructure projects. That's a significant commitment to keeping our community moving forward. The largest share of these investments falls under the right-of-way category. This includes projects like roads, bridges, curbs, and sewers, the core infrastructure that keeps people and goods moving safely and efficiently. But it's not just about roads and bridges. We've also invested heavily on recreation and cultural facilities, as well as affordable housing projects. These investments strengthen quality of life and support community growth. So let's break down the 2.7% increase in our capital budget. The increase reflects inflationary pressures and the OSIF funding cap, and is made up of two parts: the capital levy and inflation on the capital budget. In June 2022, Council committed to adding a 1.5% tax equivalent to the asset management plan and submitted that plan to the province as required. Council also committed to provide inflation adjustments. However, during the 2024 to 27 multi-year budget deliberations, those inflation adjustments were reduced for all years of the multi-year budget. For 2026, inflation on the capital budget converts to a 1.2% tax increase. If the OSIF funding cap were not in place, our total increase for the capital budget would be 0.7% instead of the 2.7. That would reduce the overall tax increase from 4.92 to 2.92. So the OCF funding cap has had a significant impact on these numbers. Let's dive deeper and talk about why Chatham-Kent is unique and why comparisons to other municipalities can be misleading. Chatham-Kent's large size and geography present numerous challenges for both the municipality and its overall budget. The next few slides highlight some of these differences. Here's one of the biggest factors. Chatham-Kent has only 44 people per square kilometer to pay for all the infrastructure and services. Compare that to places like Windsor and Sarnia, where there are significantly more people sharing those costs. Fewer people means the cost burden per household is much higher. Take a look at the circles in this chart. The size of the circles represent population density, or the number of people per square kilometer. As you can see, Chatham-Kent Circle is much smaller compared to other municipalities. We're Canada's 9th largest municipality by geography, but with a modest population. That means fewer taxpayers to fund all the services that we are required to deliver. Here's another reason why Chatham-Kent is unique. Although our population accounts for only 0.7% of Ontario's population, we're responsible for maintaining a significant network of infrastructure. Let's take a look at what that includes. Over 1,500 kilometers of paved roads, 194 kilometers of surface-treated roads, and more than 1,600 kilometers of gravel roads. That's a massive road network for a community of our size. Chatham-Kent has also nearly 5% of all Ontario bridges, having 767 bridges with spans over 3 meters, and 16,000 minor culvert structures. Maintaining this level of infrastructure requires significant resources. We also have 4,000 kilometers of drainage, which is 20% of all the drains in Ontario, the most of any municipality in the province, and over 160 drainage pumps. This is critical for agriculture and flood prevention, but it adds to the complexity and the cost of our infrastructure responsibilities. Across Chatham-Kent, municipal tax dollars do more than maintain roads and bridges. They support a wide range of facilities and services that strengthen our community and enhance our quality of life. Here's what that looks like. 11 public works garages, 19 fire stations, 11 library branches, 6 cemeteries, plus an additional 59 inactive sites, 10 arenas, and over 90 sports fields. These facilities are essential for safety, recreation, and community well-being, and they represent a significant investment supported by our tax dollars. Now let's talk about debt and what that means for our long-term financial strategy. Debt availability is calculated as a percentage of our own source revenues. The province sets a guideline. Debt repayments should not exceed 25% of our own source revenues. By 2027, Chatham-Kent's outstanding debt will be slightly less than $3.1 million. That's very low compared to our borrowing capacity. Under provincial policy, based on today's interest rates, we could take on over $900 million in debt. So we have significant borrowing capacity if needed. The key point, we're well below the provincial limit. As we continue to pay down existing debt, our borrowing capacity grows. Combine that with lower interest rates, and long-term debt becomes a more attractive option for funding major capital projects. That gives us flexibility for future infrastructure needs. Chatham-Kent's debt outstanding per capita is very low compared to neighboring municipalities and the provincial average. We're at $112 per capita. Compare that to London at $282, Sarnia at $26, Windsor at $370, and the provincial average at $505. This shows we're in a strong position. Debt funding will always be considered carefully on a project-by-project basis to ensure a fair and equitable funding model that serves the best interests of the municipality. In other words, just because we can borrow doesn't mean we will, but we'll do it responsibly. Finally, let's talk about how residents can engage. Our online public consultation format allows residents to submit questions before the Facebook Live events and then watch either live or at a later date for their convenience. This approach makes participation easier and more accessible. To reach as many residents as possible, our 2026 annual budget consultation will remain online. We schedule 2 Facebook Live events, Wednesday, November 19th at noon, and Thursday, November 20th at 7 p.m. Different times means different opportunities for residents to join, learn about the budget, and share their feedback. Deliberations on the 26th annual budget update start the following week on Tuesday, November 25th at 6 p.m. Deputations can be submitted for the first night of Budget Committee deliberations up until 12 p.m. on November 25th. So there's still time for residents to have their voices heard. So we'll now turn it over to any questions prior to turning it over for the capital budget.
Any questions? Councillor Story?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Gordon Steen, for a great presentation, really well laid out and easy to understand. I really appreciate that. I have a couple questions that I think relate to what we're talking about. The tax rate stabilization fund. How much is in that right now, do we know? And how does that get replaced when we pull from that? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Budget Chair. So I can pull up the exact dollar value in there, but I will say, as it relates to the amount that's base going into there right now, we've alleviated that through this budget process. So we were able to offset basically 0.35% of a tax increase, which was the intent of that reserve. So we do have some one-time dollars that are sitting in there, but through this budget process, we did eat up the base amount that went to it.
So we basically decide every year to shift money back and forth out of that depending on our financial pressures. So it doesn't necessarily get replaced dollar for dollar. It shifts as we need every year based on our tax rate. Thank you. Or our tax increase or lack thereof.
So correct, we don't replace it every year. It is part of the multi-year budget process. The intent of the reserve, as new items come up, it's harder to plan 3-4 years out. So as new items come up, the intent of that is to help pay for those instead of coming back to the residents of the municipality asking for a tax increase. So that's what we did in year 3. As part of this process, we had 0.35 going to that reserve. There was some new items that came up, and instead of asking for additional tax increase, we took the money from that reserve.
Okay. And the $104 increase for every $100,000 of property value, do we know offhand how much the average property is in Chatham-Kent right now? Thank you.
Yeah, so the average property is roughly, assessed value property is $175,000, give or take a few dollars. To be clear, that I want to stress assessed value, not sales value. Where we tax properties on assessed.
Right, because we're still waiting for our friends at MPAC to catch up on that.
So we, because of the provincial direction, we still are using January 1st, 2016 rates. So that's hopefully in the next few years, we'll see that updated.
We can always hope. And then last but not least, on the staffing slide, I apologize if I missed this, but could you explain why we excluded police and pathways on park from that number? Thank you.
It's up to you. So police reports to the Police Services Board, not council. So we wanted to separate that out. We have the figures and what it would total. For example, in the multi-year budget, I think it was 42, roughly 43 people added already or plan to be added over the 2024 to 2027 budget. So it was 43 people. We brought the report to council as we went from a temporary shelter to a permanent shelter. I think it's 14. I think it's 14 FTEs now that we have the permanent pathways on park. There's 14 people involved in that.
Okay. As we go through the details of the budget, we'll be seeing those numbers, right? Just in terms of I think a continuity piece when we're separating it out. As long as we're going to be seeing that as part of the dollars that we're looking at coming up in the presentation. We'll be talking about that.
Yes,
right?
in the departmental summaries, it has the FTEs for the entire departments, and so you'll see what the total. For example, for police, you can see what the total FTEs are.
Okay, and we'll see the numbers too.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McGregor, followed by Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, and through Chair McGregor. What's the saying? Picture's worth 1,000 words. I think that's the saying that's out there. And we saw some pretty good pictures or graphs from your department on the shortfall of funding that we have in many different areas. I'm going to assume that those have been put in the hands of our past councillor Pincinot, and to try and ask some questions. But I would also wonder that at least our premier of, or our premier of our province certainly loves to go after the media. Have we considered putting those lovely pictures, not more in just the Voice, but like across the board, so that it gets in front of some other areas and some other people thinking about, you know, what's going on here? Why are we not getting the funding?
I'll start off, but then maybe I'll pass it over to the mayor. You know, we've recognized with the need for advocacy, and that was part of that the deputy CEO role. Dave Taylor now into because what we've done in the past hasn't been working. We've complained about OCF for 3 or 4 years now. You remember it coming to council and council making motions to send to the province to ask for help. We get that, you know, thanks for the application, but you're capped at 10, and really no explanations. And particularly on these one-time grants, I gave the example of that north wastewater. We did go back to them and say, explain to us why, and all we get is, well, it's a very competitive. There's lots of needs across. You know, they had 3 times the amount of applications that they could fund, and sorry, maybe next time, and all that. But then we do that the next time, and it seems to not happen. So we need our help of our local MPPs, and I don't know, Mayor or Michael, you want to add anything else?
I'm just going to say that, you know, being nice and doing it the nice way is obviously not working. So I think we need to bump up our game and get the message out there. And it also helps our own community understand some of the strifes that we're facing when it comes to our budget and the finances. So, you know, I think we better maybe find a new tactic on how we're going to tackle this.
So a couple comments, and certainly, you know, we've been working for a long time now. And the purpose of putting that ad out and getting out internally, I want the average resident to understand that as well. Like right now, if you ask the average, very few people understand that. In order, if everyone understands that, there's just more pressure put on our point. And so, and as well, I think you know, this is attached to kind of every municipality in the province is asking for more infrastructure dollars. So this is kind of attached to that, and the cap, we just want the cap removed, which increases their budget. So we're hopeful that when they increase the budget for the OCIF, right now currently across the province, I think it's $400 million. If they increase that, eliminate the cap, that's taken care of. So I think it's attached to that somewhat as well, but this is where we need to really get the average person understanding so that I'm confident that when we get enough pressure put on it, they've looked and said, yes, we need to do something about it. So I like, if they were able to do this in the next few weeks, we could reduce this to 2.92. So if we got message right across, we'd say it's a 2.92% increase versus a 4.92.
But just to follow up to that, and the OSEP is just only one piece of it. You know, it's in public health, it's in the homeless scenario, it's in more than just one area. And, you know, and it is very important for locally, for our constituents and for everybody within Chatham-Kent to understand, but that's only half the picture.
Agreed, yes.
Maybe if I can just add a bit more to that. Mr. Taylor will be coming forward with an advocacy strategy very soon. We've already taken a few steps. In fact, just this month, Mr. Taylor and I are meeting with the regional director of MNR. If you're wondering why, well, MNR sees themselves as sort of the representative to municipalities to get into other ministries. So we're going to make sure that we can you know, put some pressure on MNR to help us where we need help, get some answers to some of the questions that Mr. Quinton raised, which is, we file a good application and we don't even get a response about what we could do better, why it was turned down, that sort of thing. The other thing we are doing is we used to meet with Trevor Jones fairly regularly. We are reaching out to his office and Pinson's office as well to see if we can go back to meeting with them quarterly so that we can have some of these discussions with them. So we're certainly doing what we can. I do agree with the mayor on this one that absolutely need the public to understand that there's a lot of opportunity for the province to treat us equally, and that will definitely move us ahead as a community. It's that simple. If you look at the amount of money just on OSIF, that's $19.5 million this year. Previous years, it was around $15 million. You add that up, just in the last 3 years alone, that's $50 million. That's a lot of money, right? And there's no real reason why that shouldn't have come our way. And as the mayor said, it's the province's formula. It's not ours. It's not Mr. Quinton's. It's not ours. It's the province that says, based on this formula, this is how much money you should be getting out of this funding. And I really think that's the piece that we want the average resident to understand. This isn't just us saying, look, we want more, because to the province's credit, they have helped us with stuff. We've been here a few times talking about Wheatley. There's a number of programs that we all rely on. They pay for 50% of paramedic services. Police gets grants from time to time. So it's not as if we get nothing, but we just want to be treated fairly in terms of, getting the same amount that others are getting on certain things. And we're often overlooked, and I think that needs to change. So,
just, Mr. Chair, I just want to emphasize that that's the key, is we're not asking to be treated above everyone else. We just want to be treated fairly. That's the statement we're making when we go through all that, saying all we want is to be treated fairly.
Exactly, and that's, again, getting that message out and having our community understand that, like I said before, is only one part. And I think when we are going to areas where we have the opportunity to be in front of different ministers, that we should have a package together with every one of those pictures. And it should be going to every one of them that we can get in front of, whether that's why we're in there to talk to them or not. It should be a part of their package so that they can have, like I said, the picture says 1,000 words, and they can take a look at that and very visually see very quickly where that shortfall is, and maybe some further understanding from other MPs, because when it does come down to a vote, that maybe there's some better understanding for all of them, not over and above our own. So, thanks.
Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just the first question I do know the answer to, but I think it's just important to just ask the CAO. When we're going over the efficiencies aspects, and you had the 4% ish that was up there, that was basically just strictly efficiencies. We're not talking about any service reductions. We're not talking about a decrease in rural libraries. We're not talking about anything like that. That's simply efficiencies that you found through going through either attrition or your exercises that you do prior to the budget.
That's absolutely correct, and if the treasurer wants to say it differently as well. So to be clear, the efficiency, that 4.4%, I think it is not a reduction in services in any way. If you recall, the mayor gave direction in the summer to staff to come back with a budget of under 3% if we were to get other levels of funding from the province. We obviously didn't get that, which is why we're at 4.92. But in that 4.4%, there is no reduction in services. The mayor's direction was clear, no reduction to rural services either. So that's the direction that staff took. We spent many hours trying to come up with, different ways of being more efficient. In some cases, we can't always take the credit. I mean, in some cases, it's whether, more investment income. There's some things that have happened that have helped us, but a lot of it is just people putting their heads together and trying to figure out a way, how can we do things differently? As the mayor said, we saved money with the restructuring that created the deputy CAO position. Maybe, Gord can identify a few others that I haven't identified.
think that they did a good job identifying someone. I just wanted to clear the air on that aspect, so I just don't want, it was very clear to me. I just think it publicly, we just need to be very clear that it wasn't any type of service
Zero
reduction.
service level reduction.
Yeah, and then the last thing is, I just wanted to touch a little bit on what Councillor McGregor said, and I know that the mayor's privy to more of those conversations that transpire with our MPPs and that in regards to the funding mechanisms. Is there ever, and I know you did touch on it in your presentation, Gord, but like, the thing that because I've asked them myself on a couple things, is there ever any indication, like, I understand that we have a cap. I don't understand why we have a cap, but is there a reasoning behind however long ago they decided that Chatham-Kent is the only other community besides the other two that is going to have a cap, and why? And have they ever discussed with you why that cap wouldn't be removed? And the last statement was to Mayor Caniff as well, like, maybe it would be a good opportunity to invite our MPPs in through this budget process, explain the process, explain why we're one of the very few communities that are getting capped. And just in closing, we're always talking about in Ontario how we're an advocate for agricultural provincially. We're always in Ontario saying how Chatham-Kent grows for the world. And here we are being strangled out in one of the most rural communities in the province with no fundings to help our agriculture community, no funding to help our drainage aspects. We're doing this essentially. I know that you said that we get funding, which I understand, but there's so much we're doing here on our own, and simply the residents just can't afford it, and we're left to make tough decisions. So, why there is a cap? I just would like to understand why it was ever implemented.
So I'll start with that. It just, when they introduced the OCF, they said the most that any municipality can get is 2.5% of the entire pot. So it's 400 million, 2.5% of 400 million, it's the $10 million cap. There's no rationale given, but that's it. They also have a floor. The least any municipality can get, it used to be 100,000. They actually moved that floor this year from 100,000 to 125,000 for 2026. Still a 400 million all over. So basically, the very smallest of municipalities across Ontario are getting up to often 25,000 more, taking away from everyone else because the 400 million didn't go up. One way to put it is the 19.5 million that they're 19.3 million they're taking from us, they're really just giving out to everyone else in the province. They're giving out 400 million. It's not as if they're saving the 19.3 million and not handing it out. They're just handing it out to everyone else around us, like all across Ontario. So when you think of that way, so Chatham-Kent grows for the rural world. We have 20% of the municipal drains. Because of those drains, we have 800 bridges, yet our 19 million should go to everyone else around us across the province. It makes no sense at all. We sat in front of the Minister of Infrastructure and explained that. We've gone over it with our MPPs in the past, and the answers we get from Minister of Infrastructure has been, well, 10 million is a lot of money. You didn't used to get 10 million. So back in 2018, it was around 5 when the pot was only 200 million. So I would say they need to add to that $400 million pot too. That's one of the other issues. We've been now at 400 million for 4 years. So where's the inflation adjustment on that? And if I pick on the federal government for just a little bit, same with our Canada Community Building Fund, which used to be a federal gas tax. We get $6.5 million for that, but it's been $6.5 million since 2008. No inflation adjustments. There's a formula involved there as well to do with population, and there's lots of parts to that. But basically, we've been between 6.2 and 6.5 million every year for 18 years since that fund was introduced. Where's the inflation adjustments on that? Why aren't we getting 15 million from the federal government too? So, another 19.3 million from the province, another 10 million from the feds, annual predictable money. Just think of the updates to our facilities and roads and things we could do, including on our, by the way, including on our water and wastewater at the PUC as well.
Yeah, thank you. So it was just really, there's no real reason. We just are kind of shunned here from a lot of funding, right? So wish that would change, but hopefully with the new position that we're able to advocate a little bit better. And to Carmen, sorry, my apologies, to Councilor McGregor's point, maybe we do have to start approaching this conversation a little bit differently, so.
Councilor McGrail?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I have a couple questions. The first one is if we can reverse back to the slide, the infrastructure. So the wastewater infrastructure slide. And it's a quick question, but, and how Around Us got all that money, the grants I got, like the significant grants I got. That's housing. I think there was the water systems. Oh, sorry, water systems. So, quick question, probably obvious question, but I need to ask it. We did apply for that grant, right?
Yes, that was the example of that pump station, sewage pump station in North Chatham.
Okay.
Around a
I just wanted to ensure.
Around
I
a
just wanted to make
$35 million
sure
project, and yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so, OSIF, I want to talk about that a little bit. You know, as being the representative on Roma, we have had very many talks, and I continuously bring up CAPS, and I continuously bring up Chatham-Kent, Sudbury, and Thunder Bay. Just the other day. So what I'm saying there is that, you know, we all have different hats around council chambers too, not just administration. So whenever we can, we need to all put that in there and have some discussions about that. It is on Roma's radar, and hopefully maybe through that way it can be pushed a little, but not in 2 weeks like we're hoping or anything like that. But I think it's a continuous conversation, and it's like everything else we do, lobbying, we have to do it at all different angles and ways, and we all need to continue to do that. So we'll persevere somehow.
Just if I can. Maybe you guys can comment on it. So the water funding, we actually applied twice for that project, did we not? Can you just explain that?
We actually have an outstanding application to the federal government now. It failed in this program. You know, the federal budget just passed yesterday. Hopefully in the next 3 months, there'll be some announcements coming out from the federal government. So we took that same application that was already completed and shifted it over to the federal government. And
So we failed at the provincial level.
we've already, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. We're hopeful at the federal level in another program.
Councillor Finn?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I haven't seen the ad in the Voice yet, my apologies, but have we put it out to every local newspaper as well? Because the Voice is limited to just Chatham.
We did share all of this during a media event today, so they
Okay.
had all these slides in advance as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Doyle?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just a quick question on this to Gord. So you said that the max that any community could get based on the 400 million was 2.5%, which would be the 10 million. So just curious how Essex, Lambton, and Elgin are getting more than 10 million. Oh yeah, we're.
Excellent question. We're a single tier, so we're only one municipality. It's a $10 million cap per municipality.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
When you go to Essex County, Leamington got their money, Lakeshore got their money, and so the 7 lower tiers, and the County of Essex got their money.
Okay, no, that makes
Total
sense.
together, it's 15.4 million.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? So just before we move on to the next one, I did want to make a comment on OSIF as well, and we've had this conversation earlier today with the media. I think it's great that, as Councilor McGregor said, that we share this with our representatives. And I think it's important to share it with the community as well. And when we get questions like, why is Essex County able to invest in amenities or recreational infrastructure and we can't? This is one of the reasons why. You know, Chatham-Kent taxpayers, their tax dollars go to our infrastructure needs, and it gives us less flexibility for some of those things that we see in surrounding communities. And this is one of the reasons those surrounding communities can do it, and we haven't been able to at this point. So I think that's important when we're communicating that when residents are inquiring about the investments they see in our neighboring communities. So if we have no other questions on this presentation, we'll move on to the annual capital budget update presentation.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I'm Marissa Mascara-Amiot. I'm the Director of Engineering, and I'm here with my colleague Sean Hilderly, the Manager of Asset and Quality Management. And we're here before you tonight to provide some highlights for our 2026 capital budget update. So what is our capital budget? Our capital budget is our investment strategy. It's our plan for our community. Our budget considers repairs, rehabilitation, and replacement of existing infrastructure to meet current levels of service, building new assets to provide service enhancements or meet strategic priorities, addressing community needs to meet infrastructure and environmental challenges due to the impact of climate change, and integrating these with our asset management plan to deliver reliable and efficient services and enhance community resilience to mitigate the risk of service disruptions when faced with extreme weather events. Our capital planning process recommends a multi-year plan to address the municipality's highest priority investment needs. This is based on planning for both capital lifecycle investments and new capital funding through our reserves. Our capital planning process, as you've heard tonight, started with tabling our 2024 through 2027 multi-year budget 2 years prior and considers an organizational-wide review of council priorities, service priorities, infrastructure needs, spending choices, risk, and financing options. Our capital budget priorities, both on the life cycle and new capital, reflects the best available and still evolving data about our asset conditions, service performance, financing choices, and council's strategic priorities. The result is a capital plan which is scoped based on appropriate resources and the funding needed to complete our projects. To achieve this objective, starting back in 2023 for our first year of our multi-year budget, we developed criteria in alignment with the principles in the strategic asset management policy. Recommendations were then formalized into a list of projects and a financing plan, which was reviewed by EMT, considering internal capacity, resourcing requirements to deliver on the capital plan, and funding through a capital reserve and associated life cycle reserves. The project list and financing plans were finalized and formed the basis for the capital budget presented to Council for consideration. So as mentioned, this is our 2026 update to that multi-year plan. So the capital budget book, which you'll receive a demonstration of after this presentation and where to find all the information, it includes a full list of the municipality's 2024 through 2027 capital projects approved as part of the 2025 update last year, new projects identified for 2026 and 2027, and project amendments, including updates to projects that were previously approved with updates to scope, timing, or funding. So as previously discussed, our first year of our multi-year capital budget included a detailed forecast for 2024 and started to build out our forecast for 25, 26, and 27. Our update in 25 included a fuller picture, and our update for 2026 continues to build on this. Our capital budget represents 730 projects, programs, and envelopes for work. This includes, as noted on the slide, right-of-way infrastructure, which includes our bridges, roads, and all the associated infrastructure, curbs, sidewalks, storm sewers, etc., facilities and operations, recreation and culture, affordable housing initiatives and senior services, and environment. This represents $573 million of capital investment towards maintenance, renewal, and replacement of existing infrastructure, and new and upgraded assets that address community needs to meet infrastructure, environmental challenges, or meet strategic priorities of the municipality. So as mentioned, our 2026 update includes 730 projects, programs, and envelopes based on continuing to build out our asset management plans and forecasting of work. The majority of the funding covering the capital investment comes from the municipal tax-funded capital and life cycle reserves, as shown on the slide, followed by grants and subsidies from upper levels of government, funding from PUC reserves, debt financing, and the remainder coming from other sources, including operations and service recoveries.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here tonight. Sean Hilderly, Manager of Asset and Quality Management. So in asset management, we look at the budgets as a critical tool for you councillors to set and manage your levels of service, as well as how you're going to manage that infrastructure gap over time. We've noted here in the presentation that our estimation is about $2.4 billion over the next 10 years. So that's the difference between what we are spending and what we ought to spend to be able to maintain levels of service over that period of time as they are today. Now, I just want to remind council that when we had a conversation about this the last time and identified the gap, provincially we have to talk about the gap in a 10-year window. However, we had said that we would align this over a 30-year period to deal with this gap, because the significant impacts of trying to deal with that gap over 10 years would be so impactful to the community, it would be harmful and detrimental. It was better to take a 30-year horizon to be able to manage this gap over time. It took over 100 years for us to get here. It makes sense that it's going to take us some time to get ourselves into a situation where that gap is managed properly. And these budgets are tools for us to be able to say, we need to be able to maintain and take care of these assets. As we've talked about how many assets you have here, about $13.1, $13.2 billion of assets. Those require care on an ongoing basis. And these budgets represent that investment in taking care of these assets so that they can provide the level of service that the community wants and needs. Without these investments, and this is a critical element of the presentation here, is that without these investments in this ongoing effort to take care of these assets, the asset conditions will inevitably decline. That's just a fact. And when those assets decline in condition, the cost to be able to return them back to a workable or useful condition is higher. So those costs rise in the future if we don't do the work we're supposed to do today. You're actually creating an even higher cost. And inevitably, service levels will drop no matter what our aspirational hopes are. If we don't utilize these budgets to take care of these assets, your service levels will decline. It's critical to understand the connection between the budget that we're spending equals the level of service that we're able to provide. We also want to make sure that we're making those right choices by investing at the right time, at the right place, in the right moment, so that we're creating something that we love to say in asset management, which is intergenerational equity. It's unfair to expect future generations to have a lesser level of service and pay for the mistakes of our choices if we don't consider them into the future. We really need to look at these in a long-term window. These assets will last you 60, 70, 80 years. It's a long-term perspective. We have to make sure that what we do today is good for not just today, but the long term. And this one, I harp on this a lot, I apologize, but these are your tools to be able to manage both the levels of service and the infrastructure gap. These are your tools. You set the levels of service. You set the approach for us to manage that gap. Sometimes it makes sense to strategically acquire an asset, and that will allow us to reduce the whole life cost and reduce that gap over time. It seems counterintuitive, but if you have 3 older assets and you're able to consolidate those into one particularly new asset that's more efficient, more fit for purpose, that's 3 less roofs you have to maintain, you just have to focus in on one. We would suggest that you consider acquisition, especially when it goes towards reducing that gap. Another thing to consider is disposal, and I know it's a very unpopular subject. However, when you have high-cost assets that provide very low benefit to the community or they're underutilized, it may be worth looking at repurposing that space for something else and disposing of that asset to manage your gap. Another tool that you have is to alter your levels of service. That can mean changing hours. It could mean changing the use of the particular space that you have. An example might be that if you have an open space, 2 acres of land, and it happens to be $6,000 on the grass cutting tender, if you were to say tree that area instead and reduce that over time, you are going to have continual savings, and that's how you manage that gap. It's thinking about doing things differently. It's often a message you hear tonight. Another way that you can affect that gap and manage it properly is to generate more revenue. That can be through taxation, rates, user fees. And I know it's an unpopular position from time to time, however, taxes are the price of our society. If you look at places that have higher taxes, there's often more services available compared to places with lower taxes. Taxes have to be appropriate and sustainable over time. And that brings us to our last piece of your tools that you can use to manage that gap, and that's to use debt effectively. When you have a large infrastructure gap, often using debt, especially at the very beginning, allows you to slowly bring up those rates to the appropriate level over time. 15 years, 20 years, utilizing debt to leverage your ability to get your rates to a sustainable place is a very, very smart approach. You don't want too much debt, but if you have no to little debt, it usually means you're missing opportunities to manage that gap more effectively. It is a tool that council should utilize whenever possible. All right, thank you.
So the municipality's multi-year capital budget includes significant investments directed towards road network and integrated linear infrastructure projects specifically. This accounts for nearly half, approximately 48.9%, or $280 million of our planned funding. A large majority of these assets that we've spoken about tonight are within our rural areas. This multi-year budget reflects both an increase in our right-of-way infrastructure investments across the board, aligned with what Mr. Hilderly was speaking above, and specifically an increase in our rural infrastructure investments, as highlighted on the chart on the screen. And when we refer to our urban and rural areas, we are following the definitions in our official plan, which has defined boundaries for our urban areas, including our urban centers and hamlets. So our urban areas, we are speaking of Blenheim, Thamesville, and Wallaceburg. The general distinction and definition is our urban areas are more built up areas where we have higher density of persons per area, where our rural areas have lower population concentrations. The road and bridge maintenance and rehabilitation work programs in particular are some of the largest asset management activities that the municipality carries out annually. As can be seen on this slide, the 2026 linear infrastructure work plan includes a lot of funding directed towards our pavement rehab, our major road reconstruction programs, stormwater and shoreline work, bridges and culverts. This program includes over 45 specific construction programs and projects on our right-of-way assets. And it's important to note, this excludes work completed under the Municipal Drainage Act, as that's funded differently. So some highlights on work that we've completed on the linear side for this year. We've completed over 53 lane kilometers of asphalt rehabilitation and 25 kilometers of new and improved paved shoulders. We've completed over 8 kilometers of hard surfacing of gravel roads as part of our new gravel road conversion program, over a kilometer of new sidewalks, and 3 kilometers of sidewalk replacements. Almost 3 kilometers of new guide rail installations, and 8 large bridge and culvert rehabilitation replacement projects. Some highlights for this year from those statistics include the cold-in-place pavement recycling program that we completed on Victoria Road, which included shoulder widening for active transportation, new guide rail installations on Baptiste Road and Erie Shore Drive, reconstruction of Cox and Faircourt in Chatham, reconstruction of Lamilla Street in Thamesville, completion of the roundabout, bridge, and safety improvements at the intersection of Queens Line and Merlin Road, rehabilitation of the Pangcor Line Bridge over the McFarland Relief Drain, construction of new sidewalk along Grand Avenue and a signalized pedestrian crossing at Grand and Taylor, which connects to transit stops on the north side of the road, and sidewalks along Dufferin Avenue in Wallaceburg. Highlights looking ahead for 2026 include continued implementation of our annual programs for road rehabilitation and preventative measures, gravel road conversion program, sidewalks including replacements and new, pedestrian crossings, pavement markings, water main relining, and sewer separation road reconstruction. Other highlights include continued asset management work on our extensive inventory of bridge assets, including 2 structures over the King Whittle Drain in Tilbury, and rehabilitation of the Longwoods Drive culvert of the Crookshake Drain just outside of Thamesville. We also have on the radar realignment of Talbot Trail east of Coatsworth, continued implementation of new sidewalks, reconstruction of Elgin Street in Wallaceburg, and signalization of the Park Creek and Sass intersection in Chatham. To highlight specifically stormwater and shoreline infrastructure, some work that we have underway this year aligns with our stormwater master plans, including the Laurentia and Rosalie Roberts drainage improvements, the Thames Street slope work underway now, the Short Line and Glasgow Line slope stabilization projects, and Shrewsbury drainage improvements. Looking ahead, we'll be continuing to implement the approved Stormwater Master Plan capital improvements, continuing to implement shoreline stabilization projects through the DMAF program, and we will be initiating new Stormwater Master Plans in Blenheim and Wheatley as well. Now, our capital budget includes other assets beyond our right-of-way. So to highlight some others, on the waste side, we did complete a waste diversion study, which identified solutions to reduce landfill waste. Accordingly, looking ahead, our capital budget includes expansion of the curbside leaf and yard collection program and improvements at the depots. Additionally, the municipality has initiated a waste management long-term strategy, which is identifying diversion targets, reviewing our current program, and will identify implementation recommendations. These will inform waste management services and capital needs through our 2027 and future multi-year budget processes. This year, the municipality is initiating a mobility master plan, which is an update to our previous transportation master plan and consolidation with the previous trails master plan and transit master plans to plan for future transportation improvements in a consolidated and community-oriented way. This feeds into our update to our official plan and growth strategy. This study will develop policy directions as well as short, medium, and long-term priorities for capital projects that will inform future budget updates and multi-year budget processes. Continuing on with our other assets, the updated Parks and Rec master plan that's been underway this year provides a new framework to guide how we invest in, upgrade, and develop parks and recreation spaces, services, and programs to meet the current and future needs of residents. Some highlights: this year we've completed construction of two additional columbaria at the Maple Leaf Cemetery, replacement of the playground unit at the Water Tower Park in Wallaceburg, new safety netting at Andy Johnston Field to improve safety of the surrounding area, new kayak launch at Mitchells Bay Beach, replacement of chillers at the Bothwell and Erickson Arena for improved energy efficiency and performance. And looking ahead to 2026, we'll be continuing with play structure, capital improvements, and life cycle works in our parks, the Reynolds Tract Trail improvements, continued life cycle work at our arenas, including some work planned in Wheatley and Ridgetown, and continued implementation of the St. Clair Regional Park with Phase 2 work. In addition to this, the municipality also oversees the operation, maintenance, and renewal of more than 100 facilities. The capital budget includes key life cycle activities undertaken to maintain our systems and buildings and upgrade and replace in accordance with our asset management planning. Some highlights for 2026 include planning and design for the relocation of Fire Station Number 1, improvements at Riverview Gardens, including building automation systems and upgrade to some of our internal mechanical systems, parking lot repairs, etc. Life cycle work at PABC, roof replacements at several buildings, including some of our municipal service centers and public works garages, continuing our LED lighting conversion program, and construction of the new Chatham-Kent Community Hub. Additionally, the municipality continues to advance affordable and supportive housing initiatives to address community needs and improve access to safe, stable housing for residents. Some key highlights for this year were the completion of the new building at 36 McGeorge in Blenheim, the transitional cabin site in Chatham, and construction underway with the new builds at Redwood and Eugenie in Chatham. The capital budget, again, also includes a number of life cycle activities and repairs of our existing municipal housing assets. Additionally, work continues with planning and design for housing at 199 West Gordon Wallaceburg, at the Park Street site in Chatham, and a number of associated initiatives through the CMHC Housing Accelerated Fund program. And that concludes our capital budget presentation. We can open it up to questions before we get a demonstration of the open book system.
Great. Councillor Scotchy?
Thanks. Just a quick question to Sean, and just a point form answer is good too.
I'll keep it short, I promise.
So just, the only thing I'm not understanding is that I know when we're doing like the asset management plan, so when we're talking about the gap, and I think some of the messaging has been kind of come along that this is a tax aspect from the gap perspective. But isn't some of the PUC stuff included in the gap? And if it is, this is where I try to have a hard time, where I can't understand the alienation between the two, why we're including something that's going to be recovered by rates, where it looks like our taxes are going to be required to capture this gap, but meanwhile, it is a whole different entity. And I just trying to understand why we keep saying that they're separate, but we're talking about the entities as their whole. And I even as a municipal councillor, I'm still having a hard time understanding why they're in our asset management plan when they're not really essentially our asset, so.
Great question through you, Mr. Chair. So the quick point form answer is because the legislation says to incorporate your water and wastewater services within the asset management plans. It's one of the core five ones, so we do have to include it within our plans. And on that one slide I did show, and maybe I didn't say it quite well enough, but there is tax rates, user fees, and then rates as well, that is the PUC rates
Yeah,
we'll be
for sure.
speaking.
I understand it. I just know that when there was a lot of messaging about that particular aspect about our gap, there was a lot of, I've had some social media questions in that regard and trying to explain to the people that some of these gaps were actually going to be, not that it's still money coming into your pocket, but it's actually rate driven by the water rates and waste charges and all that stuff. So I'm sure in your detailed analysis somewhere, you have it broke down, which would be, is there a breakdown which is tax-funded gap and then PUC, like other aspects? Because I think to understand that, so when we're talking about our arenas and our all those, recreational, amenities and some of the stuff that, Marissa mentioned and stuff like that, that we know roughly of what that is, because we just had a really detailed analysis of the PUC and know that their gap is really big. So how, you're looking at ours as a whole, are we doing real bad with our stuff, or is it more because it's along the rate-driven piece? I guess if I'm making any sense to you.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem about that. We did in a previous slide separate and have it shown as rate-driven and tax-driven, and that was in a presentation, I believe, and when I mentioned the gap. I honestly, I'm sorry, sir, I don't remember them off the top of my head, but I can definitely get you that slide again that shows you the breakup of what the onus is. I would say, however, the majority of the infrastructure gap, it does lie on the side of the municipality. There is significant on the PUC side, I'm not going to deny that, but it's not a small number on our side as well, too, when we just talk solely about the non-PUC assets.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Story?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for that presentation. Appreciate it. I'm sure it's quick, not easy to capture all of that in 10 or 15 minutes. Sean, I think my question is for you about, you said what the 2.3 billion is what we ought to be spending.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that the pie in the sky ought to be spending, or that is literally, because I know we'd loved, in a perfect world, we'd have 100% of our assets covered by any number of funding sources, but in reality, that will likely never be the case, and I'm sure we're not unique. I would be surprised to know if any municipality is covering that. So is there a number below that, or was that the number we ought to be spending really is that number? That's not sort of a pie in the sky in a perfect world number. That is the black and white number we absolutely should be spending at a minimum. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Excellent question. And I will say that the number will be refined over time. These were our first plans. However, we were quite conservative with our approach in establishing that number. It wasn't ever meant to be a pie in the sky aspirational. It was a good hard look at the replacement cost of actually all of the assets that we have. We have like $13.2 billion worth of assets. It's a fairly significant amount to be able to maintain them and renew them as they're supposed to be.
Okay, thank you. Have we yet done any, forgive me if I don't recall the details of all of your presentations, which I have learned a great deal from, but our $13.2 billion of assets, I assume because we're a single-tier government, that might be higher than the average municipality. Have we done a comparative look at where we land with that? I mean, that seems like certainly a large number to me, and just reinforces our previous conversations even tonight about why we are challenged with some of these funding opportunities and why it makes no sense to have caps, especially when it comes to infrastructure. But do you know where we land in the province on that number? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Provincially speaking, I believe that we do have a larger gap than some, but I would again point to multiple municipalities, and they all have exceptionally significant gaps. All 444 of them in Ontario will have some form of gap, and I would dare say that ours is a little higher when you're single tier and you have amalgamated as many municipalities, you've come together with differing conditions and how they took care of their assets all varied, and you mix them all into one, you have quite a stew of different things that you have to deal with.
Thank you. And then just closing, if I understand correctly, that is why the the Ontario government put in that legislation, because a lot of municipalities were getting into trouble and their asset management, or their numbers were getting, that gap was growing and really getting a little bit out of hand. So that's why we're dealing with that now. What is the provincial requirement for us? Is there a threshold, a percentage, or a dollar amount where we are at 236 million a year? is that a number that we should be lowering or increasing or what have you to meet a provincially legislative requirement? Are they saying to us, okay, you need to have your asset management plan meeting, you're paying for 50% of your assets or 75 or what have you? Is that something we know, or is it basically based on your population or any number of measurements? Is the province telling us this is your target and you should be meeting it? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, the province has not assigned a specific target for any municipality, and it's incumbent upon us to come up with a plan, hence the nature of the detailed asset management plans, to how are we going to deal with that gap. And I believe that the intention of the province was to allow municipalities to have a chance to move towards it and show good stewardship and responsibility. And at some particular point in time, if we're not moving towards sustainability, then you could see implications such as hard targets that could be passed along. But I have not seen anything like that from the province yet.
Okay, it sounds like we're still in the early stages of this.
Very much so,
okay.
yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Harrigan?
Thank you for the presentation. I think my question is for Marissa and potentially our CFO. When we look at the budget workbook, which I know we're going to get a demo soon, you can see broken down by year, like 24, 25, 26, 27, like specifically what projects and what those dollar values are. So I'll use Talbot Trail as an example in my ward. So that's like a total $7.2 million project over the course of our 4-year budget cycle. But it was assigned earlier in previous years. So in 2026, I think it's a 0, or maybe 2027, it's a 0, one or the other. But that project hasn't started yet. So can you just explain, and I know the answer, but sometimes constituents aren't aware, like what is that connection? When somebody sees something that is on our capital plan, it means we've assigned the dollars to it, but we may not be doing the work at that time.
Yeah, thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Great question. So yeah, our budget timelines and our execution and spending of those dollars are different periods. Many of our projects are multi-year projects, right? That's a great example. In some cases, all of a project budget is approved up front. And we're working through the design phase, working through the permitting, and then we get into the construction process. When we get into a construction contract, we need to have the funds approved and committed through council so we can enter into that construction contract. That process of spending that money will occur over time. In some cases, we may, there are some examples in our budget book, we may just secure budget for a design phase up front when we're still confirming what those construction costs are. And then that's where we may see in a future budget update through these processes, funding approval for the construction value. And again, when we get that funding approval, that's so we can enter into a construction contract, but that spending will occur over a longer time frame.
And then in follow-up to that, and I think this is a question for our CFO, and I'll use Talbot Trail as an example, right? So our friends in Windsor-Essex County got some significant dollars for Highway 3 rehabilitation. Talbot Trail kind of used to be Highway 3 extended. But right now we're footing that full bill. If at one point the province might come to the table and offer to provide that funding, that then opens up those millions of dollars. Does that go just into our capital reserve to allow us to do more in a future year? Or is that considered surplus when we have those quarterly, like the reports that come to council? How is that when we have surprise funding? I guess another example would be just the recent federal announcement with the Pathways project. Can you explain what happens to those dollars?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a long list of capital projects to fund with limited funds to fund them with. So there's always the next project. And so if I use I'll start with the cabins. We just got the official word this week about 3.7 million from CMHC, from federally, money to help that. What we've done, and it's in this budget book, we've taken that 3.7 million, put it back into the affordable housing reserve, so we can now put that towards our next housing project. I'm going to say the Westcourt Wallaceburg project that we know is moving towards tender in 2026. So, of course, we only have maybe 15% of the funding in place for that project yet, too. But that's where the strategic debt comes in as well. Affordable the only way we're going to be able to afford the affordable housing part is to spread those payments over a generation. But the same thing with a Talbot Trail. I do want to pick on Essex County a little bit because that's $600 million that the province is investing in expanding Highway 3 to the 4 lanes. $600 million that no resident of Essex County has to pay for in their property taxes. It's all taxes, I get it, it's from the province, but $600 million and they're capping us at that 10 million? Doesn't make sense.
And then just as a very pragmatic follow-up, is it our reserve policy if we get unexpected funding for projects to then keep the funds in the same category of the initial projects that they were assigned for? So you gave the example of housing to housing. Is it road to road, or does it go to like the area of most need?
I would say overall it's the area of most need. Just housing, I think, is at the top of that list. So that it naturally stayed within in housing. Keep in this is also in the budget book, but keep in remember we planned on what we approved in last year's budget was actually to borrow the $4 million for the capital for the cabins project, for the capital cost, and spread that over the next 15 years. We were also, it's one of the efficiencies in this budget is we were now able to remove that debt payment. It's paid off in full, but like I say, we're moving on to the next project, and there's going to be a debt payment coming in the future for that.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move to the budget book demonstration.
Thank you, everybody. My name's Ryan, and I'm a budget analyst. As you may have heard in some of the other budget presentations tonight, the budget team is very excited to be introducing a new format for the budget book. This year, the book will be primarily web-based as opposed to our traditional PDF or printed copy. Now, you don't have to worry, it'll still be the same budget book that you've come to know and love so much, but by making this change in format, we're able to provide a level of information and transparency that very few other municipalities do. We've also made this same format change to our capital budget book. Tonight, I'll be going over the layout of the book so that you have an understanding of what you're looking at, and then I'll be going over some of the new features that make this book more accessible, informative, and engaging than ever before. To begin, I'd like to show you how to access the new operating and capital budget books. Right now, as I speak, the books are live directly on the municipality's budget page. There you'll find a link to each book. The books are also available through the Chatham-Kent Open Book site. If you didn't know, Open Book serves as our public-facing budget portal. It displays the municipality's budget, financial data, and in an accessible and easy-to-understand format. You can access it here through this link. Once you arrive at Open Book, you'll notice a big 2026 budget update in the banner at the top. Clicking that will take you to the budget book. Just below that, you'll also see a number of spotlight cards. The first two cards will be for the operating and capital budget books. You can also click those and you'll be taken right into the book. This is the operating budget book, and as in past years, the book serves multiple important functions. It acts as a policy document, a financial plan, an operations guide, and a communication tool. Needless to say, it contains a substantial amount of information. To make it a bit more manageable, we've organized it into 4 main sections. The first section, our municipality, sets the stage for understanding the broader context of the budget. Here, you'll find council's priorities, our governance structure, and economic factors pressuring the municipality. The second section, understanding the budget, is where users can learn how the budget was developed and communicated. Here you can find our multi-year budget process, some key financial policies, and the results of our public engagement efforts. The remaining 2 sections are the actual budget. The budget summary provides a high-level overview of the proposed budget. There's a summary for each of the operating and capital budgets, as well as a summary for the municipality's FTE. Importantly, this is also where you can find the business case summary, which roughly outlines all of the business cases being proposed for the 2026 budget update. The final section, Departments and Business Cases, contains the specific information about the budget. You'll find the budget for each department, as well as the supporting information for every business case. Business cases are marked with a green header to distinguish them from the rest of the book. The business cases go into detail about the scope of the case, provide justifications for the change, and will contain any links to any relevant reports to council. They'll also include the budget and FTE impact. With that structure in mind, I'd like to now highlight some of the new features that should have everybody as excited as we are. One of the key advantages of being web-based is the ability to embed richer and more meaningful content directly into the budget book. This includes smaller things like interactive maps, explainer videos, contextual links, or what really enables the new level of information and transparency, clickable data visualizations. I'll show you some examples of how we use each of these tools. Maps, like the one featured in the CK Community Profile, allow users to explore the geography and development of the municipality to gain a sense of scale and positioning. A bit later, I'll also show you how we use the maps for our capital projects. Videos are another important tool. They allow us to explain complex concepts like how assessment values and property taxes are calculated without significantly expanding the length of the document. We've embedded some of our most illustrative videos directly into the relevant sections to help answer common questions and improve understanding. We've also included external links throughout the book. They provide important context that didn't make sense to include directly in the document. But lastly are the clickable data visualizations. These enable us to go much more deeply than what makes sense or is feasible in a static PDF document. Let's look at one that we've included in our operating budget summary. In this visualization, we're able to explore our budgeted expenses from the highest level department view all the way down to the exact types of costs we're incurring in that area. Here, you'll see our budget expenses broken down by the municipal departments. If we choose one of those, infrastructure and engineering, to see how the budget's divided within it. We can now see all the divisions in this area. We can click again, Parks, Rec, and Cemeteries, and then we can browse the functional areas that they oversee, arenas, halls, parks. We can keep going. If I click arenas, they'll be broken out into each of the arenas within the municipality. We can click again. This time we see the types of expenses budgeted for this area. And we can keep going. We click one more time and we can see the different types of those expenses, the subcategories. To the left of the visualization, we can also choose between any of the 4 years in our multi-year budget. And we can view this data as a pie chart, in side-by-side bar graphs, or in a table to see the exact values. For some context, we're currently looking at the type of building expenses in one municipal facility, in one functional area of a division, of a department, in the municipality, for only one of the 4 years for the multi-year budget. Anybody, the public, council, municipal employees, can spend hours learning anything that they wish to about our municipal budget. Of course, we have higher level summaries if you don't want as much detail, but the information is there and we implore you to check it out. Again, this is just the operating book. We also have the capital budget book, which is full of its own unique visualizations that go into just as much detail. In the capital book, you'll also be able to find detailed project sheets that lay out newly proposed capital projects as well as amendments to previously approved capital projects. Lastly, if you want to learn more about the municipal budget but don't want to comb through an entire budget book, visit the Open Book site and browse the other spotlight cards for more visualizations. One visualization in Open Book that we wanted to make special note of is our Capital Project Explorer. The Capital Project Explorer contains maps which showcase all of our ongoing capital projects and information about them. Here, you can learn about each project's budget, location, timeline, as well as other details about each project. Unfortunately, due to technical limitations, we weren't able to include it directly in the budget book, but it's up on Open Book for you to explore. With that, we hope that you all get a chance to check out the new online budget book. And if you have any questions, please reach out to the budget team. We're always happy to help. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Do we have any questions about the budget book demonstration? Councillor Dwell?
Thank you, Chair. No questions, just I think that was a great presentation. And I think having that more transparent, easier to find for everybody is awesome. So thank you for putting that together.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, we've come to the end of the agenda other than deputations, which I believe there are still none.
Correct.
So before we end, just a reminder of the Community Budget Live Q&As that are November 19th at noon and November 20th at 7 o'clock. And then council budget deliberations are slated to start November 25th and go possibly to November 27th or longer, starting at 6 o'clock each night. So if community members want to do a deputation, they're encouraged to get those in on night one. With that, thank you everyone for your attention tonight. We'll need a motion for adjournment, which I will read, and then I'll ask for a first and seconder. As per the public notice bylaw, Chatham-Kent Council hereby gives public notice of its intention to hold public meetings and adopt the 2026 annual budget update and pass a resolution to end council's budget review immediately following the receipt of a recommended budget from Chatham-Kent Budget Committee. Such a resolution would initiate the mayor's opportunity to veto any amendments, or where such veto is waived, result in a final budget. The Budget Committee also gives public notice of the need to meet in closed session at any time during the budget deliberation process as permitted by the Municipal Act 2001. Moved by Councillor Sakachi, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes. Good night, everyone.